What you're about to hear is not a scene from a war movie. This is real. This is happening right now. The United States military just unleashed the most devastating coordinated strike campaign ever seen on Iranian soil, and the world will never look at the Middle East the same way again. 5 hours, 6 cities, simultaneous. The kind of military operation that historians will study for the next 100 years. And it happened overnight, while most of the world was asleep. Like and subscribe, because this story is only going to get bigger from here. Let's start from the very beginning, because context is everything here. For weeks, the United States and Iran had been operating under a fragile ceasefire framework. A memorandum of understanding meant to de-escalate the conflict that had already reshaped the entire region since early 2026. That agreement had one core condition at its heart. Iran would stop targeting commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Ships would flow freely. The world's oil supply would breathe again. And in exchange, the intense military pressure on Iran would ease. It was simple, clean. A test, as President Trump himself called it publicly. Iran failed that test spectacularly and violently. On Monday morning, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps launched cruise missiles directly at 2 UAE supertankers, the Mombasa and the Al Bahia, both sailing through Omani territorial waters on the UN-designated Southern Corridor. That corridor was specifically negotiated as a safe route agreed upon so that commercial vessels could transit the Strait of Hormuz far away from Iranian mines and IRGC harassment. These ships were doing exactly what the international agreement required of them. They were following the rules that Iran itself had agreed to honor, and the IRGC targeted them with cruise missiles anyway. One Indian crew member aboard the Mombasa was killed. Several others were gravely injured and taken for emergency medical care. Like and subscribe right now, because what the United States did next is the part that nobody's going to forget for a very long time. Within hours of those tanker strikes, U.S. Central Command executed one of the most sophisticated and lethal multi-axis strike packages in modern military history. 6 cities hit simultaneously: Bandar Abbas, Chabahar, Jask, Kamir, Abu Musa, and Bushehr. That is Iran's entire southern coastline, from the mouth of the Strait of Hormuz all the way up through the northern Persian Gulf, all burning at the exact same time inside a 5-hour operational window. This was not a sequential strike where one target gets hit and then they move to the next one. This was a coordinated, simultaneous, multi-directional attack package that owned Iranian airspace from the very first second and never gave up that dominance. Think about what it takes to execute something like that. You need perfect, verified intelligence on every single target before a single aircraft even takes off. You need electronic warfare aircraft arriving first, neutralizing enemy radar before a single bomb falls. You need suppression of enemy air defenses. F-18. Growlers flooding the radar picture with electronic noise, harm missiles launching off F-16s and F-18s to physically destroy surface-to-air missile. Systems before they can track and engage strike aircraft. You need Space Force satellites providing real-time targeting coordinates, MQ-9 Reaper drones watching every rooftop and coastal hideout from high altitude, and dozens of strike aircraft from multiple directions arriving on target at precisely the same moment. This is not improvised. This is a machine. A well-oiled, lethal, perfectly synchronized machine, and it executed flawlessly. And then the bombs started falling across 6 cities at the exact same time. The primary targets were IRGC command headquarters, ballistic missile storage warehouses, coastal radar installations, drone storage facilities, and anything and everything tied to the IRGC's ability to threaten and control the Strait of Hormuz. Footage emerging from near the city of Naval showed one of the largest explosions seen during the entire conflict. A massive fireball that engulfed the entire sky, followed by a chain of secondary explosions that kept going and going and going. When you see secondary explosions like that on video, you know exactly what was stored underground in that facility. Rocket propellant, ballistic missiles, ammunition stockpiles stacked to the ceiling. The IRGC had deliberately been hiding their missile inventory inside hillsides and fortified bunkers built deep into mountainsides. A strategy specifically designed to protect their most valuable weapons from exactly this kind of strike. But the intelligence picture was already complete. CENTCOM knew exactly where every one of those facilities was located, and they hit all of them. Like and subscribe right now, because what these bombs actually are is the most terrifying conventional weapon system ever assembled by any military in human history. The bombs being used across these strikes are not ordinary munitions by any stretch of the imagination. A 5,000-pound bunker buster can already punch through reinforced concrete and detonate deep inside a fortified structure. But the footage from Desful and multiple other strike sites suggests something even heavier and more powerful going to work. The secondary explosions, the scale of those initial blasts, the way fire spreads across an entire hillside, This has the unmistakable signature of weapons that penetrated deep underground before detonating and ignited everything stored below. When a ballistic missile fuel depot goes off from the inside, when stored rocket propellant catches fire simultaneously with stored warheads, the result looks exactly like a volcano erupting from beneath the earth. That is what IRGC missile facilities looked like last night. And then there is the GBU-57, the weapon that the entire world has been watching and talking about since Operation Midnight Hammer back in June of 2025. The Massive Ordnance Penetrator, 30,000 pounds, 20 feet long, built specifically, and this is absolutely not an exaggeration, built specifically and exclusively to destroy Iran's nuclear program. It took 15 years to develop into its final form, Defense Threat Reduction Agency. Officers spent over a decade and a half studying a single target, Fordo. They monitored every ventilation shaft, every exhaust system, every electrical line, every piece of equipment that went in and came out of that mountain over the course of 15 years of continuous surveillance. According to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, they literally dreamed about that target when they slept at night. And when the moment finally came in June 2025, 7 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers flew an 18-hour non-stop mission from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, refueled 3 times in midair over open ocean, penetrated Iranian airspace completely undetected, and dropped 14 GBU-57 bombs on the Fordo and Natanz nuclear facilities. That was the first time this weapon had ever been used in actual combat. It was designed for one purpose and one purpose only, and it performed exactly as designed. Like and subscribe, because there is still one target that has never been touched, and experts are calling it potentially the most dangerous and deeply buried nuclear site on the entire planet. Pickaxe Mountain, known in Persian as Ku-i-Kolangazla, located approximately 1.5 kilometers south of the Natanz enrichment complex in Isfahan province, in the Zagros mountain range. This mountain rises over 5,000 feet above sea level. IAEA inspectors have never once been allowed inside. Iran began construction of this facility back in 2020, immediately after a sabotage operation widely attributed to Israel destroyed an advanced centrifuge production plant at the Natanz surface facility. Iran's message was clear. If they are going to destroy what we build above ground, we will build the next generation so deep underground that nothing can touch it. Whatever Iran has been constructing inside Pickaxe Mountain has been deliberately hidden from the entire international community for 5 years, protected by a security fence several kilometers long connecting it to the Natanz perimeter, defended by 2 heavily fortified tunnel entrances that have never been opened for inspection. Unlike Fordo, which was attacked during Operation Midnight Hammer and sustained significant structural damage, Pickaxe Mountain has never been struck, not once during the 12-day war in June 2025, not once during the current round of conflict that began in late February 2026. It sits there untouched, while every other major Iranian nuclear and military installation has been systematically degraded. President Trump has made his intentions regarding this site extremely clear. He has publicly described Pickaxe Mountain as primed for what he called a big fat shot. That big fat shot is the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator. The central question that military planners are working through right now is whether even the GBU-57 can reliably reach and destroy whatever is buried deepest inside that mountain. Fordo is estimated to be buried roughly 80 to 90 meters underground. Pickaxe Mountain rises considerably higher above the surrounding terrain, which means whatever is built underneath it could be buried at depths that exceed even Fordo's protection. The GBU-57 is designed to penetrate approximately 200 feet of earth, or around 60 feet of reinforced concrete before its warhead detonates. But Iranian engineers have developed ultra-high strength concrete, exceeding 30,000 pounds per square inch of compressive strength, far beyond the specifications the bomb was originally engineered to defeat when the program began in 2002. The solution being seriously considered involves weapon sequencing and layering. Drop a Moab first, the 10,000-pound massive ordnance air blast bomb, to fracture the outer surface layer, disturb the rock structure, and begin opening the entry channel, then send the GBU-57 in to drill the rest of the way through, sequencing multiple weapons on the exact same entry point to penetrate progressively deeper with each successive detonation. Think of it as an opening act, followed by the main event, except the opening act is a bomb that would flatten an entire city block, and the main event weighs 30,000 pounds and arrives traveling at over 700 miles per hour. Like and subscribe, because the IRGC is not simply sitting there waiting for all of this to happen. Here is where the situation becomes genuinely and seriously dangerous. The IRGC is sophisticated. People hear that term applied to what is essentially a paramilitary force, and they underestimate it immediately. That is a strategic mistake. Iran has spent decades developing asymmetric maritime warfare doctrine specifically engineered to contest control of the Strait of Hormuz without necessarily provoking a full conventional military response. They have buried C-802 anti-ship cruise missiles, Chinese-derived precision weapons, in hidden coastal positions all along the Iranian shoreline. These are not missiles sitting out in the open where satellite imagery can clearly identify them. They are concealed in positions that look like ordinary terrain from overhead, completely camouflaged, capable of launching with very little warning against ships that may be 20 or 30 miles away. That is almost certainly what struck the Mombasa and the Al Bahia on Monday morning. A C-802 launched from a concealed coastal position, targeting tankers that were sailing on the UN-approved Southern Safe Route through Omani territorial waters. The IRGC's formal position is that the southern route is unauthorized, that any ship not using their specifically approved corridor, which deliberately diverts vessels much closer to the Iranian coastline and through potential minefields, is a valid military target. The international community does not accept that position. Neither do the shipping companies whose crews are being killed, and this is where the internal fracture growing inside the Iranian regime becomes critically important. Because what is driving these attacks is not necessarily the political leadership sitting in Tehran. Iranian state television cut Speaker Ghalibaf's broadcast mid-sentence last week. Hardline IRGC-affiliated clerics are now publicly and openly calling the Memorandum of Understanding with the United States an act of treason against the Islamic Republic. The shadow generals and admirals who actually control Strait of Hormuz operations appear to hold more practical operational power in this specific moment than the politicians who are nominally in charge. These are commanders who spent their entire careers building and protecting Iran's asymmetric naval capability. They are not ready to surrender it under pressure, and critically, they have the ability to put pressure on Iran's political leadership, precisely by continuing military operations, because if Tehran's politicians try to restrain them, those same shadow commanders have the leverage and the capability to make political leaders' lives extremely difficult. Like and subscribe, because over 50,000 civilians inside Iran have reportedly been killed by their own government since this conflict escalated. That devastating number comes from confirmed intelligence reporting that President Trump has publicly acknowledged. While the world's attention has been focused on the military campaign, the IRGC has continued targeting Iranian citizens who have attempted to organize and protest the regime. The rate of civilian killings has slowed compared to the peak period, but it has not stopped entirely. The people of Iran, ordinary citizens who have lived under this regime for decades, who have taken to the streets knowing exactly what the IRGC is capable of doing to protesters, are still being targeted by the very military force that is simultaneously being dismantled from the air above. This is why the systematic degradation of the IRGC is not simply a military or strategic objective. It is the fundamental precondition for anything resembling political freedom inside Iran. As long as the IRGC retains the capability and the willingness to deploy lethal force against the Iranian population, the regime survives regardless of how many missile depots get destroyed or how many generals get killed. The strikes happening right now are not only about the Strait of Hormuz or nuclear weapons. At their deepest level, they are about breaking the instrument of repression that has held millions of Iranian people hostage for 45 years. The United Kingdom has now formally designated Iran and the IRGC as a terrorist organization, a designation that had been repeatedly resisted for political reasons for years and has finally been implemented. The United States has reinstated the naval blockade of all ships going to and from Iranian ports, effective Tuesday at 4 in the afternoon Eastern Time. This is the second complete blockade in 3 months. Global oil prices immediately surged more than 9% when the blockade reinstatement was announced. The Strait of Hormuz, through which roughly 20% of the world's seaborne oil supply normally moves, remains one of the most contested 40 miles of water on Earth. Like and subscribe, because the coalition confronting the IRGC is significantly larger than most mainstream coverage is acknowledging. The UAE has deployed its own fighter aircraft and is conducting independent strikes on Iranian military targets. Saudi Arabia has simultaneously moved with decisive force against Houthi rebels in Yemen, an Iran-backed proxy force that was being reactivated by Tehran precisely to open a second front, stretch coalition military resources, and threaten the Suez Canal as a secondary choke point. The Saudis understand exactly what unchecked Houthi activity means for global energy shipping. They have seen this playbook executed before. This time, they are acting preemptively rather than reactively. Jordan intercepted 4 Iranian ballistic missiles fired toward its territory. Bahrain activated air raid sirens and ordered residents to seek shelter. Qatar's military defense systems intercepted an inbound missile attack against its territory. The entire Gulf region is militarily mobilized in a way that has no historical precedent in any previous confrontation with Iran. Iran's public rhetoric against this backdrop has become almost surreal in its disconnect from the physical reality on the ground, as their coastal cities burn, as their ballistic missile warehouses erupt in catastrophic secondary explosions, as their IRGC command headquarters disappear under the impact of precision-guided 5,000-pound bombs. Iranian officials continue issuing statements declaring victory and strength. The era of one-sided deals is over, they announce, while tankers on a UN-approved safe passage route get hit with cruise missiles. The Strait of Hormuz belongs to Iran, they declare, as a six-city coordinated strike simultaneously destroys their ability to threaten anything moving through that waterway. Whether this represents genuine ideological conviction impervious to external reality, or whether it is calculated domestic theater designed to manage an Iranian population that is increasingly aware of how badly the IRGC is losing, is a question with serious implications. Because if the shadow generals genuinely believe they are winning this confrontation, the operational tempo will not decrease. And if they know they are losing but are continuing anyway, because stopping either way, CENTCOM appears fully prepared to keep working through the target list at whatever pace is required. Like and subscribe right now, because what comes next could be the single most consequential military decision of this entire conflict, and perhaps of this decade. Pickaxe Mountain is still waiting. The intelligence picture on exactly what is contained within that facility continues to be refined and developed. No IAEA inspector has ever walked inside. No satellite image has revealed what is actually being built beneath that mountain. Only the construction activity on the surface, the two-access road, approaches climbing toward the tunnel entrances, and the extensive security infrastructure surrounding the entire compound. The working assumption among the most credible defense analysts is that whatever Iran constructed inside Pickaxe Mountain after 2020 represents the most hardened, most deeply buried, and most... What is happening in Iran right now is not a limited military skirmish with a clear, defined endpoint visible on the horizon. It is the systematic dismantling of the most powerful, most well-funded, and most regionally destructive terrorist military apparatus operating anywhere in the Middle East, a force that has destabilized the entire region for over 4 decades, that has funded and armed and directed proxy forces from Yemen to Lebanon to Iraq and Syria, that has held its own civilian population hostage through mass violence while enriching a clerical elite, and that crossed a clear and explicit ceasefire red line when it launched cruise missiles into commercial tankers sailing on a UN-designated safe passage corridor. The free people of Iran deserve a future without the IRGC deciding who lives and who dies in their country. The international shipping lanes that carry a fifth of the world's energy supply deserve the security and freedom of navigation that international law has always guaranteed. And the coalition that is systematically striking back against the IRGC right now is pursuing both of those goals simultaneously, whether every participant in that coalition would use those exact words publicly or not. Like and subscribe right now, because this story is accelerating and you need to be here when the next chapter breaks. 6 cities in 5 hours. Ballistic missile warehouses turned into volcanoes of secondary explosions. IRGC command centers reduced to rubble and fire. An Iranian regime still issuing defiant statements while its entire coastal defense grid disappears, strike by strike. A 30,000-pound bomb that could be heading toward the last completely untouched nuclear site anywhere on Earth. A naval blockade now in full effect for the second time in 90 days. And millions of Iranian civilians who have been waiting for decades for the moment when the IRGC finally loses enough power that they can stand up, speak freely, and breathe without fear. This is history. This is happening right now, today. And it is nowhere close to being over. Make sure you are subscribed with notifications turned on, because when Pickaxe Mountain finally becomes a headline, you're going to want to already be here.